So I'm Reverend Emmanuel from Houston, Texas, and we are right now still in the middle of COVID. And this week I've had such a busy life, I've not had time to put much thought into doing this video. As you all know, I like doing videos about theology and culture and spirituality. So this is going to be like a quick video about Snowpiercer, looking at Snowpiercer with this question of why are human beings sometimes very violent, and how can we help human beings become more loving people. So it's going to be a quick video because, as I said, I didn't have much time to do much prep work for this video. So hopefully you'll excuse me for this week. So, anyways, Snowpiercer is a movie made by Bong Joon-ho, who's a Korean director. He's the one that made the movie The Parasite, which was the first movie that was made outside of Hollywood to get an Oscar ever. That was in 2019. So Bong Joon-ho basically made a movie called Snowpiercer back in 2013, I believe. Yes. So this movie is set up in a world where human beings are living in a post-apocalyptic setup, and the only living people in this world are people that live in a train. So in this world, in this train, you have the three classes of people. The people at the very front of the train, who are a bunch of party-going narcissists, if you will, and people in the middle part of the train who are like people living in comfort, kind of living a typical middle-class existence. And then you have people at the tail end of the train who are people that are kind of the refuse of the whole train, if you will. They are the people that are oppressed the most. So what is apparent in this movie is within every system there is so much violence, and people are always killing each other in different ways in order to kind of survive. So the question of why are people violent to each other is because of the question of survival. When we try to survive in this world, in fact, from an evolutionary standpoint, we call it survival of the fittest, right? When we look at it from that point of view, when people's survival is threatened, people become violent. So this movie has three main characters. One is Wilfred, who is the guy that designed this whole train. He's the one in the engine room controlling the whole train. And in this movie, he is seen as the one that is kind of the god of this world, because he's the one that is most powerful. And then you have Gillian, who is somebody at the tail end of the train. He is someone that is trying to control the last kind of the tail end people in the train who are living in squalor. And then you have Curtis, who is trying to create an uprising from the tail end of the train to try to kind of disrupt this kind of class system that is there in the train. So at the end of the movie, Curtis is able to create a revolution that gets him all the way up to the front of the train. And when he gets to the front of the train, he meets with Wilfred, who is the one that designed this whole train, and asks him why he's created this kind of a system where the people in the back of the train are oppressed by people in the front of the train. And Wilfred says that for any closed ecosystem to work, there has to be a sense of natural selection. The idea being that some people have to die for other people to live, right? And the strongest people end up living and the weakest people end up dying, which is kind of an evolutionary way of looking at life. So Wilfred says, in order for that to happen, he had to allow some people to die. And he had to control who died at what point, so that there is order that is sustained all over the train. So from Wilfred's point of view, violence that is created to kill people within this train is just violence. Because from his point of view, for people to survive, there has to be violence, there has to be killing, so that there is balance within this ecosystem. And this brings up the question, how is it possible to create a just world? Is it even possible for there to not be violence? And the movie gives like two different aspects of it. On the one hand, you have Wilfred, who's trying to oppress everybody else, and he is trying to control the violence that is inherent in people by trying to have three classes of people. The people in the very front class, they party a lot and they kind of use drugs and all this stuff to kind of keep their aggressive side behind in control. And then people in the middle class in the train are given comfort, nail salons and all these creature comforts to keep kind of their sense of aggression and violence at bay. And people at the very end, they are controlled by controlling their food. Because if you control their food, then you control the people in the back, and they're the ones that get often killed and slaughtered. So Wilfred's solution to kind of controlling people is to use power to control people's aggression, to use power to control people's kind of desire for violence for the sake of survival. On the other hand, there is another character who uses a slightly different way. Gilliam. He is the guy at the tail end of the train, and as the movie goes on, you realize that Gilliam is a kind of a self-sacrificial guy. So to step back a bit, when the tail end of the train was there, in the beginning of this journey, the people in the tail end were not given any food, and at that point, the people in the tail end became cannibals. They basically started eating other people, and Curtis was one of those cannibals. He kind of started killing people and eating them, and there was this one point at which Curtis was wanting to kill a young baby and eat that baby, right? I told you, it's a violent movie. They don't show any of that, it's just Curtis talking back about that. And he said that there was an older man that chopped off his hand, gave it to him and said, hey, if you need something to eat, I would rather you eat this hand of mine rather than eating this little baby, right? So what you have here is a guy trying to kind of model what does it mean to be somebody who's peace-loving instead of violent. When Curtis saw Gilliam do this, chop off his hand in order to save this little baby's child, that changed Curtis. Curtis became a different man, and he decided that he was going to fight on the side of what does it mean to be a loving person. But even then, Curtis is unable to control his full aggression. He's the one that incites this revolution and leads this whole group of people from the tail end of the section all the way to the head of the section to take over Wilfred and create justice in this train. Except when he ultimately gets to the front of the train, he meets with Wilfred, and Wilfred tells him, hey, you can have my place. You be the leader, and you decide what do you want to do. To create order and structure in this train, are you going to allow a few people to die, or are you going to completely stop this train, which means we all will have to go outside this train into the world, and we all will die, because the whole world is frozen. And at that point, it almost seems like Curtis is about to change and turn, except there is a young kid that is with Curtis. She opens one of the compartments in the engine to show him that there is a little kid underneath who is in this bonded slavery, and it's that little kid that is keeping this train moving. Curtis asks Wilfred, hey, why is this little kid over there? And Wilfred tells him the little kid is over there because as the different parts in the train kind of break, they don't have a replacement to make a new part, so they're using these little kids to kind of make all these mechanical movements so that the train keeps going, so that everyone survives away from this world where everything outside is frozen. When Curtis sees there, his mind goes back to the time when he was living like an animal, when he was eating all these people, when he was a cannibal, and he didn't mind killing children, right? And now, after having experienced Gilliam's modeling of what does it mean to be a loving person, to be self-sacrificial, at this point, Curtis decides that he is going to save that kid no matter what. And in trying to save that kid, he loses his own arm, just the way Gilliam did, right? So what we see in this movie is the sense that for us to be able to change people, for us to be able to prevent people from going back into their animal instincts, you could either be like Wilfred, who's trying to use power and control to kind of channel people's aggressiveness, or you could be like Gilliam, who is using a sense of modeling a form of what we call Christ-like love. Gilliam, at that point, kind of manifests the sense of Christ figure essence, which is to sacrifice himself for the sake of other people. Different people do this at different points in the movie. I'm not saying Gilliam is equal to Christ, because Gilliam is not. Gilliam is again trying to use a different form of control to control people, because Gilliam is actually in friends with Wilfred and in trying to keep this structure and order in this train. So Gilliam at that point, when he saved that little kid from Curtis, was expressing this form of Christ-like love. And Curtis, when he was saving the life of that kid at the expense of his own hand, he again was expressing this form of Christ-like love. And the father of that Asian child, Yun, his name is Nam Sung, he too starts as a drug addict in the back of the train, but as he keeps coming to the front of the train, he expresses a form of Christ-like love in sacrificing himself to save his own daughter, for her to go out and have a chance at life. So that's where, when we look at this movie from a theological perspective, what we find is people that display this form of Christ-like self-giving love, where they're willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the other people, they are the ones that are best at modeling what does it mean to be people of love and peace in this world. People that use power and control the way Wilfred does to control other people, and that perpetuating and creating the system of power and control, which ultimately creates violence and self-destruction. There's a social psychologist called Albert Bandura who did this experiment called the Bobo doll experiment. It's an experiment in which an adult would spend some time with the Bobo doll, in which an adult would be violent to this Bobo doll and keep hitting this Bobo doll, and a kid will be watching it from the outside. And then when they allow the kid to have time with this Bobo doll, the kid would go and beat this Bobo doll over and over again. And then they had this other group of kids who observed adult not being aggressive to the Bobo doll. And then when they let the kid come and be with the Bobo doll, the kid also did not try to kill this or attack this Bobo doll. And he created this theory called social learning theory, by which what he meant is, for us to be good people, we have to be shown a model of what does it mean to be a good person, and then we can be the good person. And that's what we find in Jesus Christ. In Jesus Christ, we have God who incarnated into this world to model for us what does it mean to be people that are peace-loving. Instead of trying to use power and control the way Wilfred does, Jesus models in a way that Gilliam does at some points, in the way Curtis does at some points, in the way Nam Sung does at some points, to show us what does it mean to be self-giving people, so that we create this kingdom of love and peace. Anyways, so that's all I have for today in terms of this movie, and the question of what does it mean to be why are people violent, and how can we create a peace-loving people? Why are people violent? It's because when people's survival instincts are triggered, people become aggressive and violent. And how can people become more loving and peaceful? It is when people display the sense of self-giving Christ-like love, which ultimately comes from the model that Jesus set for us when he lived in this world. When people see that, that's social learning, or that social modeling, ultimately what helps us to become people of love and peace. And again, as I said, I'm sorry this is kind of a long-winded discussion. As I said, I didn't have much time to do prep work for this week, so this will do for now, I suppose. So until I see you in the next week, bye. And if you would like to like or subscribe to my channel, I'll be happy if you could do that. Anyways, thank you all. See you again.